Hi folks, welcome to your latest mwis Outlook in association with Ellis Brigham. Now, there's some rather damp Atlantic air that's moving in across the British Isles over the next few days. It all becomes a bit tangled then as low pressure drifts southwards toward the end of this week. The end result of that is likely to be a much improving story across northwestern regions and the signal for higher pressure to be more dominant into next week. It's a wedge of generally damp air that's being drawn in across us then through the middle of this week in a broad, warm sector with tropical maritime air from the mid-Atlantic. The moisture then that's within that is just going to blanket the western hills and mountains in a lot of low cloud. Fog from lower slopes upwards in many respects across western Scotland, some drizzle, some rain, and all rather damp and unpleasant. Higher cloud bases toward the eastern side of the Highlands, not too much rain around here, a few spits and spots. Increasingly, as the warm front sinks southwards into northern England and Wales, that low cloud and rain and drizzle will start to encroach in here as well. But much of the South Pennines and a good part of Wales gets away with a decent day before this murky air starts to come in from the northwest. That same general zone of damp air is plaguing many regions onwards into Thursday, the warm front just going a bit further southwards. Now, along this zone, there could well be even the odd heavier burst of rain that breaks out through the day. For Wales, for Pennine areas, maybe even across the eastern side of Scotland, the odd heavier burst around in places. The humidity in the atmosphere, just the trigger to get one or two heavier areas of rain going. Otherwise, a lot of low cloud again. Fog to low levels around the Irish Sea and western Scotland, drizzly dampness that persists most of the day. And for west and northwest Scotland, as the cold front tries to come in, that may just then bring some heavier, steadier rain as time goes on. Some brisk winds too for at least part of the day across the Highlands, lighter winds further south. Best chance of some cloud breaks then more toward the eastern side of any hill groups. Things then getting quite complicated in the atmosphere as we go towards Friday. Basically, we've got a trough of low pressure that's sinking southwards across the country. It's still sort of developing itself at this stage within that humid air mass. So a zone of heavier rain coming southwards into England and Wales. The speed of that is open to some question, but it may well give several hours of prolonged heavier rainfall and low cloud covering the hills here. The dregs of all of that still across south and eastern Scotland, but improving conditions trying to come in across the northwest. So for the Northwest Highlands, maybe increasingly across the West Highlands, the day may well improve with higher cloud bases and drier conditions becoming established. But how soon the south and east of Scotland improves is uncertain, and I think just work on the idea at this stage of a poor day across a good part of England and Wales. Wind pretty light, but the day on the whole rather poor. Now, this area of low pressure has the potential to be quite a big rainmaker for some areas as we go onwards into the weekend, and it may well once again focus itself towards the south and east of England and away from many of the hills and mountains. We may though still have the legacy of areas of rain and low cloud around Wales, across Pennine areas, possibly still even rotating into eastern Scotland if that warm front just tries to come back on itself. The risk of one or two showers around in places, that might be a bit more focused out across Ireland, but the scope for that also across central Scotland. Northwest Scotland, the West Highlands, again, perhaps doing the best for being in a dry environment, clearer conditions, some sunshine. You may do very well in this part of the world as high pressure is starting to topple in here. But further south and east, your greater risk is that one or other of these frontal systems is spoiling the day, and we'll get the detail of that a bit nearer to the time. The area of low pressure that's driving all of that weather is still hanging around then across the south of Britain as we go into Sunday. That's the scope then for that ongoing heavy fall of rain for some. Might not look exactly like this chart, but it's the idea of low pressure being somewhere toward the south. And for Wales, for the South Pennines, that risk is there. There's a chance that this whole thing has dragged itself further away by this stage, so not to rule out that conditions may well improve for many places into Sunday, but we're just watching that at this stage. High pressure building out to the west and the north, toppling further across into Scotland, so it may well be that for Scotland as a whole, Sunday looks a good day away from that weather system. Increasing likelihood then of improving conditions across these northern regions. Go further south, still the risk of being bothered by that same low that will have been around for a few days. Now, for a time, some rather cool conditions get dragged down from the north this weekend into Scotland, just as that zone of low pressure pulls away southwards, higher pressure then building across the north, as we've just seen on the previous charts. The paler colours on this chart indicating where that general trough of low pressure will exist, somewhere toward the south of Britain. Even this chart hasn't got complete confidence in where that centre of low pressure is going to go, but it's drifting southwards one way or another. We were looking at the scope for some hotter weather being drawn in from the south in the later stages of June, and that's still trying to get into Central Europe as we head into next week, but just the positioning of that low hasn't quite allowed that to come towards us, we think, at this stage, but things still dragging some warmth and some humidity back into the story as time goes on, so that initial coolness around the weekend is likely to give way to rising temperatures as we go into next week. Now, the question really is just how long low pressure still festers around toward the south of Britain. It's that risk of some lingering areas of rain and some heavy, even thundery showers. That might well be focused right to the south of England, possibly into Wales, but I think that's where it's confined to. Further north, higher pressure toppling in, and the likelihood is that most of the mountain areas that we're interested in go into a fine, dry and generally warm picture as we go into the middle stages of next week. This is by the 1st and 2nd of July. The indication is that higher pressure is built toward the north of Britain, and fine conditions would prevail over a good few days. Eventually that thundery trough of low pressure further south has then drifted further away. The most likely situation is that a good few days of high pressure would lie ahead. You can stay up to date with all your local forecasts every day on our website. That's been your Planning Outlook in association with Ellis Brigham. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.